Okay, we're now recording. So welcome everyone to Risk Assessment. Lovely to have so many people here. It is so heartwarming to see that people want to improve their practice and find out more, and I just love it. I love that you're here and wanting to see how you're sort of stacking up against the compliance and the best practice of it all. Now let me just see, someone's written to me in chat. Apologies in advance, I don't have access to a microphone or camera at the moment. No worries, Josie. You'll be able to get this, you'll be able to see it, so it'll be like being in a true webinar, but you'll also get the recording as well, which comes with the transcript of any questions that people may ask. So now, just by way of a bit of a hands up, who here was here for our comprehensive assessment 2 weeks ago? Great. You can use the hands up if you like in the what do you call it? The actions, I suppose. All right, so it looks like we haven't got a lot that we're here for the assessment, but that's okay. This can stand alone anyway. So last fortnight we looked at our comprehensive assessment, which is leading to a person-centered support plan. And the reason I say that is because over the years of NDIS, it's been, people have been sort of thinking about an assessment as one thing and a support plan as another. It can be that way, but it certainly doesn't have to be. And you certainly can't have a person-centered support plan if you haven't asked all the questions. So that's what we covered last time. And today we're going to do risk assessment. All right. I'm going to point out to you in each of the places on the risk assessment, which of these things are a compliance issue and which might be a best practice issue. So you'll know as we go along whether it's something that's absolutely required or whether it's a best practice, and it's a good if you do, but in auditor can't say anything about whether you've done it or not. So let's try and making sure that we haven't got any background noise, just for quality of the recording. And I think what I'll do is share screen. And we'll have a look. I'm going to also, I've got another message there. Are you able to get a copy of the last recording? Yes, it will have been put up onto my learning management system. So if I just write myself a note to put a link to where that can be obtained if anyone wanted to watch it. I'll do that in the mail out from the Eventbrite. And just a heads up too, with the Eventbrite, when I send out the recording and any resources with the Eventbrite, sometimes they go into your spam, because they come from that kind of generic email, which your system will recognize as spam. So if it doesn't look like you've got that recording by tomorrow afternoon, please check your spam mail, okay? Because it's a very good chance that they will go into that, I can assure you. So let's start by sharing screen. Now, what we're going to look in is my entire folder on individual risk, because I'm just going to do a little walk through a few of these things. Now, I didn't even think, for those of you who may not have met me, my name's Gina Ingerall. I'm a consultant and an NDIS auditor. However, that isn't my claim to fame. I've been auditing and assessing in quality standards since 2004. So NDIS is just one of many sets of standards that I've assessed over the years. And so for quality and compliance, I've been doing this since 2004. I've been in health since 1987 when I graduated as an allied health professional. And in terms of running community service, disability, mental health, drug and alcohol services, I started as a frontline worker in the year 2000 when I changed careers from my allied health profession, and I became a CEO in about 2004. I've also done policy for state government and some Commonwealth government, and yeah, so I've got a bit of a well-rounded background, I suppose, and I can see it from all angles. So I don't just see it as a provider, and I don't just see it as an advocate for participants, and I don't just see it as a funded service or a funder of services. I see it from all angles, And I think, that helps me to keep it quite a balanced look at, what we need to do, and then how does that really sit with how our providers can implement that, etc. So I'm hoping it brings a balanced view. So let's have a look inside my folder. So if I just touch back on when we did our comprehensive assessment, my comprehensive assessment touches on a few questions which would flag a risk. We don't drop everything down tools at the time of doing an assessment and start risk assessing. We flag and we come back to those in our risk assessment. Now, for those of you who may not know, the NDIS quality and safety standards say you can risk assess. They don't say you can risk assess if you want to, and they don't say risk assess people that you think might need risk assessing. It says every single client that you onboard into your service will receive a risk assessment. Now, those risk assessments are going to be determined by a few different things. First of all, and just put your hand up if you can't see inside my Dropbox where I'm looking at these folders. If I see no hands up, I'll know you can all see inside, okay? So I do have a bit of a checklist here, which helps people to remember what, in which order, etc. But first of all, we know we're going to assess. That's going to help us flag whether there are risks for us to explore. But regardless, if we came out of that assessment process and we didn't flag any risk at all in there, you are still obliged under the standards legally by the NDIS legislation and the rules to move on and do a risk assessment. Now, if nothing comes out of that risk assessment, fabulous. You've got a risk assessment that hasn't uncovered any risks, yeah? But that's usually not the case. There is usually something. It's a very occasional time where there won't be a risk with this group of people who are receiving NDIS, because remember, it has to be an enduring condition that they have, yeah? Okay, so try and keep your computers muted if you would, because I can hear rustling in the background. It just doesn't help for the recording, that's all. So we've done our assessment. Now we're going to move on and we're going to do a risk assessment. Now that's going to look differently depending on the service that you're going to deliver. So this is our participant risk profile or risk assessment. It doesn't really matter what you want to call it. And I've got a bit of an example here, which I'll also send off with for you as well. So we have a few risk assessments. It's really not just one. We have one overarching one, which is this participant risk profile, which asks a lot of questions. We'll come back to that. Then we also have one which is for a swallowing, a nutrition and swallowing sort of checklist. Now, if you're using a good assessment tool for that first assessment process that we looked at 2 weeks ago, it's going to ask, are there any swallowing problems? And then that's a flag. So if there's some swallowing problems, that's a flag. So we do a nutrition and swallowing checklist. Now, I'll let you know that before the NDIS, when we were back in statewide services, and I worked not only in the services at some point, but also in the senior, policy area, every single client admitted to an ageing disability in home care service in New South Wales was required to have a nutrition and swallowing checklist if they were going into accommodation. Okay. Now, I'm really pleased to see that the mealtime management standard was added in 2022, better late than never. But that is pushing people's focus onto all of these issues that people can have around their meal times. And it's not just about swallowing. This is one of the mealtime management issues that you will experience, but there are many other issues around mealtime. And so if we look back to the way the state or systems were run, there was a lot of good things and they all got thrown out. So you heard the expression throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's pretty much what happened when we went from our state services and we morphed into the NDIS, which is a national service. And I'm not just guessing that. So I did actually take a look back in 2017. I thought, I'm ready to come back into this thing they call the NDIS after taking a leave from disability. and I went to the national quality team for the NDIS. And when I got there and we were looking at problems and poke, at saying, we don't know this and we don't know that. And I went, but I don't understand how you can not know that. We had all that data. Where's that data? And I was told that it all got lost. So the NDIS has literally almost in every essence started again. So all of the data we collected as state bodies at state level is gone, and they've had to start again. So that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And a lot of that went with also there were no swallowing and nutrition self-assessments being completed on staff. Now we're starting to see that again. And I certainly have had them in my policy documents for a long time. And we just use the ADDIC ones, the Aging, Disability and Home Care. They had them in every state. We were very, very clear in each state what needed to be done. I'm not saying it was a better system, it's not. But there were some things that we could have taken with us into this new system called NDIS. So that's moving on to our next type of risk assessment. Then we've got someone, for example, who isn't in supported independent living. Perhaps you've got a community client, but you're going to do some work in their home at some point, whether it's personal care, whether it's just skill building, etc. So we have a risk assessment which is for the environment and includes manual handling. So if you're going to be working in someone's home, you need to do an environment and manual handling risk assessment. Now, that risk assessment is not only going to look at the safety for your staff, it'll be about trip hazards and problems that are foreseeable you could see that are going to occur, any of the manual handling equipment. I'm seeing a lot of staff that just get thrown into using a machine that they haven't actually been trained with. We need to start looking at competency sheets for that. I have competencies for all the manual handling equipments. We wouldn't have dreamt of just throwing people into these duties at one point in our history, but unfortunately it's happening now, and we need to reverse that. So environment and manual handling risk assessment for people for whom you're going to be working in their home. I've also got in here, we've got a fact sheet on, a lot of people are not quite clear around dignity of risk versus duty of care. So I made up a little fact sheet, I suppose, which I've intended for people to use, maybe to give out in their staff onboarding, as well as even using, and I suggest that you use it in supervision or staff meetings, etc., or have them showing or pinned up somewhere in a discrete place. Any of those, all of those, and whatever else you see fit to do with it. Does everyone remember the participant living alone risk assessment and when it came out? In 2021, I think it was, or might have been early 2022. I'm losing track of time. But does anyone remember the person for whom the sad occurrence that happened as a result of that? Can anyone tell me who that was? Yes, Emma?
I believe her name was Anne-Marie Smith.
Correct.
Yeah, a shocking case, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So now we've got the living alone risk assessment, which a lot of nurse colleagues of mine said, we don't even understand how that wasn't even asked in the first instance. And there's another thing that was actually thrown out with the bathwater. That was the baby got thrown out with the bathwater. So starting again, once again, at the expense of, somebody's life. And it's not just Anne-Marie's life, that's serious enough, but there's all the other people who will have suffered along the way with, wound care and just, poor quality care and not enough risk management strategies in place, etc., because there was no awareness around why there would need to be any risk management strategies in place for someone living alone and what were the questions to ask. So this living alone risk assessment, should it be flagged in the assessment, and you would move to this then at that point, it leads you through a range of questions which will help you to see whether that risk is non-existent, low, medium or high. The form can't tell you, no machine can tell you what to do but it can show you where the risks are. And I tend to use traffic light reports or traffic lights. So green is good or go, amber is watch out, there could be something happening, and red is a definite risk. So every one of my risk assessments, everything I do in terms of reporting and risk assessment is using traffic lights so that there's a very clear visual. I'm very visual and I like to see those colors. It really helps me. So we've got our living alone risk assessments. Now, remembering in here, I'm not saying go through and do one of these risk assessments on everyone. Please don't think I'm saying that. I'm saying we need to flag it in our assessment process, whether there's a need for these. Yeah. Except for, remember, the exception of the participant risk profile up here, which everybody must have, even if there's nothing to write there. Okay. Next one. So we've got our living alone. Then we've got outings. And there could be a better word for outing than outing, because I did see a little TikTok thing the other day, which said, we don't like the word outing. So I'm thinking, well, I don't know what other word will we use. I'm not sure, but that I'm just adding that because, you know, that's part of the culture that we're kind of working in, isn't it? If people are not really resonating with the word outing, we'll have to come up with another word that's going to be more to their liking, I suppose. But this participant outing risk assessment, it's not just for when you take people to the regular shops that you take them to. There will be some auditors who will be very, very picky and say that you must have that as well. But from my perspective, I think that the participant outing or environment or risk assessment is more for that outing that you're going on that is not something that you do regularly. So it could be about definitely for when you're going canoeing. I've had people say, oh, we had this accident at canoeing, and so did you have an outing risk assessment in place? No. I said, well, it could have helped, you know, like, and it's not just about, is this a best practice? This is the requirement. You know, it's a requirement to have assessed where you're going to take that group of people and try to have brainstormed, given their conditions.
I think you can make that bigger though. I don't know. So now it's gone volume because what's
Can
gone
somebody
in?
turn off your sound if you would? That would be really good. Yes, well, the bathroom and hot water, we ask, this is for Elisa, who's asked, do we have any bathroom or hot water risk assessment? We most definitely ask about, in my assessment form, we most definitely ask about any hot water vulnerabilities, etc. And I also have I've made the practice alerts, which there's 12 of them, and one of them is hot water. I have made the practice alerts into short courses so people can, you know, I think they're about 10 minutes each. It explains each one of those practice alerts and asks for assessment questions at the end. And, you know, obviously we've had a tragedy with hot water not all that long ago, haven't we, as well? So it seems to be that with so much, until something happens, people aren't looking at these elements. And I've often said, and I know I don't mean to sound like a negative Nelly, but it wasn't until a big backpackers hostel fire that took a lot of lives that we had smoke alarms mandatory in buildings. You know, I'm just not wanting for that to happen in supported independent living before we, you know, we have some real mandatory things, because people of my era and the work that we've done over many years, we're absolutely shocked that supported independent living is this mythical creature which doesn't appear in a legislation. Yeah, there's nothing much legislating it, and we're very, very shocked at that. It's just so sad to have seen that, oops, we forgot that one in the NDIS legislation. You know, what we can do as auditors is audit the site. There is actually nothing in the legislation that says you need to go into a supported independent living site, but we can interpret it and use the supported independent living home as a work site And as such, an auditor can and mandate you to allow them into the supported independent living site. But it's not like I want to sort of give you any ammunition to be able to go, oh, well, if we're not regular, if that doesn't really say what we have to do in SIL, we don't, if those standards don't sort of name every action we have to do, well, we can do what we want. I don't think there's too many people out there that will want to do that, but that is the truth. The truth is there is very little in those standards which apply to supported independent living homes. And that's really sad. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff about SDA, but not a lot about supported independent living, okay, which is a real bummer. So we call it, especially those of us that worked at Aging, Disability and Home Care, we call SIL the mythical creature, like the unicorn. It's made up. It's a made up name. It really doesn't mean anything. An SDA, it has a module of its own. It's called Specialist Disability Accommodation. It's bricks and mortar, but we don't have something else that's called SIL, Supported Independent Living. We don't have it. The closest thing we come to in a service registration module, which is for SIL, is personal care and activities of daily living in a shared environment. I mean, we were absolutely gobsmacked when we looked at those standards and saw how little applied to supported independent living. If there was an SDA standard, which is module 5, there should have been another module called supported independent living, and it applied to that building, that home, you know, and all of the soft services that are delivered within it. So it's really quite difficult to ensure good service delivery when it's quite abstract, because there isn't a particular module on supported independent living. I'm just going to read some comments. Yes, you'll get the risk assessments. Mental health risk is challenging with different diagnoses, symptoms, presentation. Is there a specific mental health risk assessment? Well, a clinician has to do a mental health risk assessment, but I'll tell you what I can give you. And I was so thrilled one day when someone said, oh, I've been delivering that mental health plan to every client that comes into my supported independent living home. And that was the first provider that said to me they were using it. And I was so thrilled. So what I will actually do is throw that in too. And I'm so glad you asked. It's called a mental health wellbeing plan. So if you had a clinician and they were working as a clinician, they could do that, or they could do a clinical assessment. But if you don't have clinicians, you can't do it. But what you can do is this mental health wellbeing plan, which helps you to go through a process of finding out what mental health issues this person might have and what do they want you to do, or they or their carers, etc., if something goes wrong. So we do this a lot in where you have a peer workforce, and a peer workforce is a lived experience workforce. It can be in a range of sectors, but let's take, for example, the mental health peer workforce. They're being hired because of their lived experience. It's quite more than likely possible, in fact, usually happens, that at some point they're going to become unwell. So we have a mental health wellbeing plan in place for peer workers. And it says, if I begin to do ABC, that will show you that something's happening for me. And when that happens, this is how I would like you to treat me. Yeah. And so having those things are really helpful. So I will pop that in as well. It's in a mental health pack that I have here. Is there an NDIS specific risk matrix, or can you use standardized matrix? Oh yes, standardized. Oh, God forbid that the NDIS would ever go to the lengths of having something that they've built. It's just, they're too busy trying to catch their breath, I think. Definitely there is, and I'll show you the one that we're about to go and have a look at. So still moving through risk. So we've come to this, you know, what's a better word than outing? Because obviously, I mean, it's only one person that said it, but there could be other participants that didn't like it. But what else do you use for the word outing? I don't know. Participant outing.
Activity.
Okay, participant activity risk assessment. Yep, you know what? I might change it to that. Now here I've put in a risk register in here because obviously not everybody has one of my compliance management registers. So I put in a participant risk register here. Can anyone tell me why do you think we've got all these risk assessments? Why on earth do we need a risk register? Can anyone tell me the reason behind it? And it doesn't have to be a register. Sometimes it can be something in a software that you've got that does the same thing. So it's non-prescriptive about how you show what it is that needs to be shown, but it has to be done. So can anyone tell me the reason behind a participant risk register? Because it's important if you know the actual need for it. It's easier to oblige in those activities or tasks if you have an end game in your mind, you know why you're doing it. So why would I say that for any of the risks that you calculate for someone, that you would put them into a risk register? Who wants to have a stab? Or we'll have a look in the chat. To track the risk, that's pretty good. For the review process, yeah, community access is a good for that participant community access risk assessment. Yeah, that's pretty good too. Absolutely, you're on the right track. So the thing is, we need to be able to, here we go, we've got some more, I'm going to read them out. Monitor the risk, how the organisation responded to the risk and what controls and assurances there are in place. To put it in a way, of managing the risk. Yes. Register assists to show the risk assessments completed and the tracking and the review and the monitoring. Correct. So I always think of the register of any kind, certainly the registers in my compliance system. They're you looking from a helicopter down on everything that's happened. Okay. So you've got, let's say you've got 150 clients and you've done 150 A++ risk assessments. They're perfect. And you've got the risk assessments and the management strategies and the review dates, etc. You've got it all done, but you can't go to 150 different files on a weekly basis or even a daily basis, can you? So what you simply want to be able to do is know at a glance, who are your risks at a glance, to be able to sort through the dates and know when they're all due. Now, if you've got a software that alerts you to that, that's great too. But I've seen very few softwares that do it really well. There are a few, but not many, because the software is only ever as good as the information that you put in it. So what I see is, I see softwares that I know the capability of because I've used them, but I see that some of those parameters are not switched on for that provider, and therefore they may as well not even have it. So, and when I go in and I see review dates that have passed and they're 6 months down the track, how's that going for you? I mean, that's not working, is it? Because if you're not actually reviewing them at the dates that they say they're going to be reviewed, you haven't implemented it. In essence, sometimes softwares are brilliant, but you've got to know how to use them. You've got to know whether they're switched on in the places they need to be switched on. And remember that a vendor will sell you anything. And sure, it's probably got all of the bells and whistles that they tell you it's got, but have they been switched on and do you know how to use them? That's really important, because I often see underutilized softwares. Okay. So yes, this is your helicopter view, your reminder. It's got the dates. Your position description would say, my job is to oversight compliance, which means if you have an Excel compliance management system, and your PD should say, and I will look at this at least once a week, and then that would be in that person's performance indicator as well. Have they looked at this once a week? Yeah, are they doing their job? Because where it falls down is having all the brilliant things, but nothing to back up in a governance point of view, the doing of these things. It's the doing. We have to do them. We have to look. We have to cast an eye over these things. So that PDs and policies and performance appraisals and supervision all back up the doing And yes, it's a snapshot. What I like to do, and the reason I developed it back in my operational days, is because I needed to see. You know, at 25, I could remember anything. But at 35, it got a little harder. At 45, a bit harder. And now at 58, I need registers and I need snapshots. Yeah, I need to be able to look at them. And what do you know? Lots of other people do too, you know? So some of the best, some of the auditors that have clients of mine who use this religiously, it's cut off half a day out of their audit. Now that's not, like, I'm not saying we're all going for, we all need to try to cut half a day off our audit. It's not about that. It's an information repository and the information was there. And if the information is there and that auditor doesn't have to go, can you show me something else? Can you find that? Can you go there? Let's have a look at here and let's try and piece this together with 5 different documents. No, let's try to have it all in one information repository. So you have overview from the helicopter all the time. Now, our last couple of things are participant transition was incredibly underdone and it's only just getting attention now, which I'm so pleased about. Who would like to tell me what a participant transition or discharge plan, if you like, what do you think it's need? Why is it there? Why do we have it? And if I had Caramello bears to give out, I'd give it to the person who answered it spot on, but I don't have any Caramello bears to give out or Freddo frogs. So why do we have a participant transition? And it's sitting in a risk folder, isn't it? So that gives away something. It doesn't have the word risk in the name. Okay, yes, it is to ensure continuity of service. It is for transparency and continuity. It is to share important clinical details, all of those. How you exit a participant from your service provider and hand over to another org. Yep, to pass on services efficiently and effectively to allow continuity of care, to make sure the transition is safe. Absolutely. So it's sitting in a risk folder because what it actually does, and like the NDIS usually do, is name something so completely remote to its purpose that it confuses people, right? It really is made up of risks. It is, you're going to another service provider now. Here are the risks with this transition. Yeah, this is all these person's risks. And now the next person is going to know everything that we found out in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, however long it was. And the best thing about that is, number one, it could be a much easier process for that participant. Number two, it could be a safer process for them. And number three, it could cost them a whole lot less in their budget, because when with my nephew, when we changed service providers, I asked this service provider to please make a participant transition, and she refused to. And so what happened was he got to the next service provider, and I don't know how many hundreds of dollars later before they found out what all the risks were. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just makes sense. Like, we send somebody with all the known risks, and it doesn't matter whether they ended on bad terms. That doesn't matter. We have to be big people. We don't worry about they left on bad terms. If they refuse to accept a transition plan, fine, you've asked them, just note it. Yep. But bad terms, good terms, or any other terms, doesn't matter. This is part of our job, so we're going to try to do it unless they say, we don't want anything from you. Okay. All right. And then your risk indemnity form. Well, when do you think we use our risk indemnity form? And Elisa has said, it's also not fair on the participant to have to go over it all again. Exactly. We can make it so much easier. Who wants to tell me when we would use a risk indemnity form? Okay, so nobody's put their hand up or said anything yet. So what I'll say is, number one, part of the standard says that person has a goals a goal and there will be some risks, and which of those risks are really going to impact on that person reaching their goals. Okay, so then we've worked out which risks they are through your support planning process. And then we think, okay, so these are risks, but the standards also say we are not going to let a risk determine whether we'll allow somebody or support somebody to do something. Okay, so if it's possible that this person do the thing that they want to do, yeah, then we will try to make it possible for them. Now that may require that we'll have, okay, you've got severe lifestyle diseases, you've got metabolic disorders, you've got hypertension, which is cardiac disease, you've got all these things, and you want to keep smoking. It would be a really good idea for you to not, but this is your choice. So how can we make it safe? Yeah. What can we do? And it might be that, you know, people have to use aprons, which are the lead kind of aprons, etc. Or they might have to be away from other people. So that's one way, you know, and I would want a waiver signed by either the person or their family that we have spoken about this. This is not the best thing for this person, but it's their choice. And we're going to try to make it as possible and as safe as possible for them and everybody else concerned to do that. We can keep encouraging, we just can't make somebody do something, yeah? So same with food and diabetes, we can keep encouraging, and I don't think we should ever stop encouraging, but we just can't make somebody do something. Yes, you'll be able to see the forms, yep. I'm just giving you that bit of a broad overview. So risk indemnity is to protect you as well, because some people may want to do something which you don't think is a particularly good idea, but if you've talked it through and risk managed it, and you've been able to mitigate the amount of risk that was there in the beginning, then perhaps helping them to do so is the right thing. Now, what should never happen is that, you know, like duty of care will always trump dignity of risk, okay? So let's have a quick look at that for a start. And it's probably a good place to start, actually. Let's have a look at, because people get, you know, mixed up and think, oh, I don't really know what's expected of me here. This is a lot to ask from me as a service provider or making these decisions. So duty of care is your legal obligation to take all reasonable steps, you know, to keep people out of harm, while dignity of risk is affording the person with the right to take reasonable risks. So we're trying to manage a balance, yeah? So it's okay that somebody does something that is risky, and it's really, you can see it's not the best thing for their health, whether it's the food that they're eating or the smoking, or there'll be some other fun things that people might want to do as well, like, you know, paddle boarding, when they've got epilepsy. There's such a large range of things. Jumping out of an aeroplane is a really standard one that people use. 80-year-old jumping out of aeroplanes, etc. We use that in aged care. So the duty of care needs to always be upheld. However, the participants should be given autonomy they need to make their own decisions. It's the organisation's responsibility to mitigate any risks that are mitigatable, yeah? That are mitigatable, allowing that participant to freely make their own choices. So what does it look like? So let's say a person with a physical disability has always wanted to swim, however, they were never presented an opportunity. Now in the supported independent living environment, they can learn to swim. The duty of care to be considered is that they cannot swim, and this poses a risk. However, an ordinary person would have the chance to swim, and therefore the organisation should assist in minimising the risks to allow that person to swim. This could mean that you might have a 2-to-1 ratio rather than a 1-to-1 ratio. It could mean even when somebody is taken in the water, just the fact that they may be able to swim, but they may have epilepsy, yeah, and they may have epilepsy that comes without notice as well. So example 2. Another example would be a person in supported independent living who has a long-term drug and alcohol use and is a heavy smoker. Here's the one we talked about. They know the risks but continue to smoke. staff are being told by the participant's medical practitioner they need to give it up. You know how you get hammered from, you know, you can get hammered from the GP in terms of their health and they need to stop this, but you can't stop it. You know, we have a young boy, young man with autism, and he just wants to eat chocolate after chocolate after chocolate after chocolate, and he's putting on weight. And the father thinks that the support worker should be able to stop that. And it's like, we've brought in a behaviour support practitioner now, more for the father, because the father hammers the services. Yeah, the father is blaming the services for them having it. We can't tell someone no. We can encourage them to make other choices. But if this boy wants to go and spend his money on hamburgers and chips and chocolates, there's very little we can do without that being a restrictive practice. So there are times when we need to look toward, you know, these risk indemnifications where we can encourage and we can do our best. The parent can take it away from them, but we can't. Yeah. So there's this duty. And so it isn't always as exciting as about a person jumping out of an airplane or going to swim with crocodiles or sharks. It's not always that exciting. It's day-to-day things like their health and their smoking and their eating, their diabetes, all of these things, these day-to-day things. Now, when the NDIS first came out, I don't know if you'll remember, but people got very carried away about choice and control. So they took somebody swimming to the waterhole, didn't they? And that person drowned. They didn't know how to swim. They didn't do any risk assessment. So we have kind of come a long way from there. That was a new provider that never worked in the system before. And yep, let's take this person all the way out on a trail without any of the risks being assessed in the first place. Okay. So does duty of care still exist while participant is outside of the surface, i.e. the weekend, but you're aware they are at risk? You should risk assess. Well, if you mean it's your supported independent living client and they've gone on a STA somewhere and you had nothing to do with the choosing of that STA, I don't see how it can be your risk. But at the same time, if a STA was going to do their job properly, they would most certainly be looking for all of that information from you. So it's a collaborative process. So I heard an auditor, believe it or not, say the other day, and this is a colleague of mine, about a client of mine who does a lot of what we call boot camps, so STAs. And she went, oh yeah, you mean, you know, we've got to do this in proportion. They don't need all of this risk stuff and everything like that. He's only doing boot camps or STAs. And I thought, I can't believe that you just said that. He's taking people for 24/7 for 6 or 7 days at a time, and that may as well be SIL. You know what I mean? Like, how can you say that that is a low risk? It's a high risk, depending on the person's conditions and diagnoses, etc. So I don't see how anyone can think STA is automatically a low risk. It's definitely not, and it depends on what the person comes to you with. So duty of care still is 1% outside. So is that what you meant by outside the service, or are you talking about they've gone somewhere? So I don't even know whether you're talking about a SIL, David. So I'm not sure how to answer that one. But you can update me later. So let's have a look now. So now we've got this kind of overview now. So I wanted you to see how many risk assessments there were, and that you wouldn't be needing to do each and every one of them unless it was flagged in individual support. So if you took somebody out and you're being paid to look after them, you are responsible for what happens to them. And that's why we need to do those environmental risk assessments, or community participation, or community access, which I think is a much better name than the outing, community access risk assessments. So that could mean, you know, swimming, it could mean canoeing, it could mean paddleboarding with a different provider, etc. So yeah, I'd have to sit down and find out exactly what you meant by that, David. But yeah, if you're out with them, or your service people are out with them, then you're responsible. If they're being taken out by their parent, you're not responsible. But So let's go back to the beginning now. So remember we said, which one of these did I say everyone has to have be assessed with? Can you remember which one of these everybody has to be assessed with, but you may not find anything, and that's okay. That's it. Everyone must have a risk profile, okay? Even if it's squeaky clean, okay? Which doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. The discharge document, we'll have a quick look at that. So participant transition, it's all about the risk, okay? So participant transition in or out, okay? So we just ask a few questions about, reason for the transition. That's neither here nor there. If we notified the transport asset forward or the referrals, it's a good idea to do that. Why make it difficult for the next provider? There's no room for any personal grievances with other providers. Be the bigger person, just think of the participant. Get some feedback from your client if they're leaving. What are the risks associated with the exit as perceived in sort of the delay in transition? Will supports be able to still be provided? So please collect all of this information. So what's the risk? How will you manage it? Person responsible, participant is in agreement, which service provider will fulfill this? So if it were done ideally, this is how it would be done, okay? And then you've got your little checklist there. As I said, some people will say you won't be on good terms with them and they won't want it. As long as you note that, that's all that matters. You can just do your best. So coming back here, let's look at now, we're going to go through the risk profile, okay? Should I open the one with the example? I think I will, all right? So this one that it has been done, this is an example. Actually, rather than show you all the colors straight up, I think I'll just go to one that is empty. Okay, it's an empty one, okay? Alrighty, so to what degree does this client rely on services from us to meet their daily living needs? This in itself begins your risk profile, okay? We need to know, is in the Anne-Marie situation, if you like, how much a person relies on your services. And that's what the risk assessment profile for living alone takes you into. This is just another way to flag it, okay? This isn't the living alone risk assessment in itself, but this flags what's the dependency of this person on services. To what extent would the health and safety of the participant be affected? These are required throughout the standards. This is littered in there that this kind of thing will be managed, that the fact that people's dependency has been assessed and you know what their dependency is, okay? So then communication has become very big. I don't know that any of you are regular readers of the standards, but there is definitely a practice standard which deals with this alone. Much, I guess, coming back to Anne-Marie Smith again, she wasn't able to communicate. She wasn't able to say she was in pain. She wasn't able to say that I've got a septic wound on my bottom. Yeah. So what's the chance that there are plenty of other people with communication issues? And what are those communication issues? And we ask that in the assessment, but I double down on it by asking it here as well, okay? So what are these communication problems that people have, and how will we know when you're in pain, discomfort, or distress, okay? So, and another little thing that I do like to add is in relation to behaviour support. One of the first things to ask when you're seeing a behaviour which you can't see an immediate reason for is to find out if someone's in pain, because often behaviors come from pain. It's certainly a good place to start. So lifestyle. So here we go through the yes, no, or you don't know, because the first time you meet someone there, you may not know yet. So this could be something that just needs to be done. What you know today and what you learn in 2 weeks' time if it's a supported independent living client, yeah, with no family to give you any information. But you might have a lot of information from a support coordinator. You might have information from a guardian, or you might have information from the family. But there are going to be times when you don't know yet, so TBA, okay? So these are our relationship and sexuality. risks. Here are our unsafe lifestyle choices, where we talk a lot about. Before we were talking about, you know, the dignity of risk, etc. There's lifestyle diseases which result from often alcohol, smoking, and food, etc. So we've got unsafe lifestyle choices. We find out what we can on that onboarding session. Hazard exposures, you know, how safe is this person around in the sun, and safe and bathing with hot water, poisons, sharps, smoking. In example, do they smoke in bed? Flammables, are they a fire lighter? Electricity, are they unsafe? Would they be likely to, you know, are they that person that may stick a knife in the toaster if the toaster's not coming up? You know, all of those sorts of things. Environmental and social, we want to know about traffic. We want to know about stranger danger. We want to know about whether they like to go wandering. How are they with other people in the home? Will they need visitors? What visitors will be coming into the home? Are they apt for social isolation? Do they have a lack of informal supports? Are they coming to you with homelessness issues? Are they leaving care? Who knows what leaving care means? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to guess yes. Good, Lauren. Leaving a statutory care. And give us some examples of statutory care. It could be leaving a care facility. Yes, Lena. So leaving statutory care might be, what do you think? Yeah, foster care, resi care, all of that. So people who are leaving care often have a whole set of emotional and perhaps even mental issues that they're bringing with them. Yep, and you can imagine what some of those are. So, you know, if you've been in 7 foster homes and you've just turned 18 and you're now leaving care, If you're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, also just bear in mind that, you know, have people been from the stolen generation? Any statutory care organisations, even some people have been in maybe a supported accommodation for a very long time. Maybe someone's coming out of a longer term psychiatric unit, you know, not an acute unit, but a long-term psychiatric unit. Okay, so we've got lots of environmental and social to ask. Now, some of this you might already be able to know for other reasons, like the support coordinator has been able to pass on the information, etc. Behaviours of concern, so suicide risk, self-injury, assault, physical, verbal, intimidation, use of weapons or projectiles, property damage, harassment, harm to animals, exploiting others, abuse and neglect. You've got your usual suspects, you know, whether it's been observed, suspected or reported, evidence of neglect in the past, community services involvement, aggression from others, exploitation from others, being targeted by others. And this should really inform your, you know, if you're a SIL provider, I know a lot of SIL providers that don't match very well. For some SIL providers, any match is a good match for their place, and really that's not how it works. So eating and drinking, dysphagia, choking, are they on a peg feed? Do they have food allergies? Now that's where, when we talk about mealtime management standard, it's not just about, a very big part of that, of course, is dysphagia, but it's not just about that. It's also about all of these other things like peg feeding and allergies, intolerances. Some people don't have a diagnosis of dysphagia at this point, but you start to notice a little bit of coughing and spluttering at mealtime. So it's about really bringing everyone's awareness into what happens at mealtime for this person. And the best way to do that is with a My Eating and Drinking profile. Yeah. Because they're paying money. And if you're paying money to go to a service or a hospital, you expect the care. And these guys deserve the care going into a supported independent living home. So then we've also got mealtime management where people will refuse food. We need to know, are they a restrictor because they don't like to eat, an anorexia, etc., or is it are they restricting food because do they have swallowing difficulties? There's something wrong. Then there's people who are on medications around mealtime. Alertness, and this is what we have practice standard training, the practice alerts, which deal with a lot of these issues that have come up. The medications that make people not very alert, and so they can get into trouble when they're eating. Do they need modified utensils? Are there behaviours at meal times? And the environment, what kind of environment do they need? Is there strict instructions from a speech therapist or dietitian? Where are we going? Medical conditions. So you will have already picked these up in an assessment, no doubt, but and then you can pre-populate if you've already done that. So these are just a number of medical conditions which they're not exhaustive, but they're fairly common. Okay. So ensuring that. Now this is a new, this came in 2022 in December, because what the practice standards ask is to keep an eye on these medications. Do you know when somebody's taking a psychotropic drug but they don't even have a mental illness? That's really important to know. Do you know why that's really important to know? Incarceration as well, Lena, absolutely. Well done. So leaving care could mean coming out of jail as well. Yeah. Who knows why it's really important that we note that someone taking a psychotropic drug does not have a mental illness? Come on, you guys, you're clever. Chemical restraint. That's exactly right. Just an unwritten chemical restraint. So if it's if it's authorized, regulated, meaning, you know, whether it's in the choice of restrictive practices that we're able to use as a disability service, but authorized meaning it's in a plan. So is it in a plan? Then it's authorized. If it's not in the plan and it's being given to somebody, then it's unauthorized. And that's a tricky place to be in, but it's a place that needs to be addressed. Because what is not fair is when a GP prescribes something which is a behavior changer, yeah, and there is no mental illness. So they're doing it specifically to change a person's behavior, but they're not willing to write that up. And so what I want you guys to remember is that, yeah, that's right. It could be for epilepsy, but we do need to take a note, like for epilepsy, they can, well, let me say, they can use some epilepsy drugs as mood stabilizers. And we can use diazepams and stuff like that for epilepsy, absolutely. So knowing the drug and what it's used for, and that's what comes to clarity of purpose. And I hope you all have a form that's called clarity of purpose, so that when you have somebody who has some of these drugs, which could be a bit kind of not clear about why they're having it, you need to be clear about why they're having it, because why should a GP not take any responsibility but allow the provider to take all responsibility in terms of PRN for drugs which are mood changes or behavior changes, but they're not willing to sign something to say that that's why they're giving it. So I want you guys to think really clearly about your responsibility and whether it's all being piled onto you, so that the GP doesn't need to take any, okay? I want you to think about that and start thinking about clarity of purpose forms for where these kinds of drugs are prescribed for no apparent condition, okay? I think we've covered that quite well. Then we've got some other medical things. There might be refusal of medication. They won't go to appointments. That happens a lot. We can just go so far, can't we? I mean, we can implement a CHAP, which is a comprehensive healthcare assessment plan. We can implement one of those, but we can't make people go to their appointments. All we can do is encourage and use innovation. That's all we can do. Refusal. We do get a lot of that. Personal care. Do they have risks around feeding, toileting, showering, dental hygiene? Please be really, really aware of oral health, because, I mean, apart from the fact, probably because I was an oral health clinician before I started in community services in 2000. But the fact is that you eat with your teeth. If you can't eat, you can't get nutrition. If you don't clean your teeth, you will have pain, you will have infection throughout your mouth. It is such an enormous part of a healthy person. Okay, so we really must focus on people's oral hygiene the best we can, because not everybody will want your help. I know that. This young man with autism, he doesn't want to brush his teeth. So what we did, and it won't work for everybody, but it does work for some, we got him a water pick. He doesn't mind the water pick. He'll do that, and it's better than nothing. The NDIS Commission, I'm just trying to read this from Lauren. NDIS released a medication purpose form providers to give prescribed. Oh, that's good, because I made one years ago. But it's I just have a clarification of purpose, but I'm so pleased that they're doing the right thing finally. That's good. GPs often have no idea of the concept of chemical restraint, correct, and often need education on clarity of purpose form. Yep, but a lot of them also do know that they're doing it for the family, and they've been doing it for a long time, and that they don't really want to state the clarity. They don't want to state why they're doing it. Could we use a different word other than feeding, maybe mealtime? I reckon. Yep, I reckon that's a good idea. Yeah. If it feels right, then absolutely change it to sound better. Yeah. Personal care, accidental movement. Yeah, so some people have a startle reflex, panic attacks, grabbing, holding, sudden movements, falling, tripping, bumping, running. This is all pretty standard stuff. Now, what about our risk of infectious diseases? Is it something that's chronic, recurrent? Another one of the practice alerts is around people who have frequent URTI, upper respiratory tract infection. And there are groups of people who frequently have upper respiratory tract infections. Yep, it's just the way it is. Manual handling, what's needed here? Obviously, we have the environment and manual handling for people who are being serviced in their homes. And so you don't need to double handle. If you're doing this one, I'm already doing a environmental and manual handling, so I'll just skip through this one, and it'll be referred to environmental risk assessment. We want to know if they have trouble with vehicles. We want to know if they fall on stairs, getting up and down out of buses and things like that. Any other unsafe actions? The reason there's so many here is because if we don't provide prompts, there are a lot of people who don't know what they don't know. And so it's better to provide lots of prompts than to be not capturing enough information. Yeah, feeding is a bit ADDIC, isn't it? Yeah. If ever ADDIC, everyone is aging, disability and home care. That's what ADDIC is. Change the language to suit, absolutely. Unsafe actions, yes. Money. We see a lot of exploitation around money. It could be even the person's partner. We see their people's partners exploiting them for money. Inability to budget, vulnerable exploitation, giving money away, losing their purse often, doesn't ask for receipts, tries to borrow money, impulsive spending, gambling, etc. Knowing what you've got up front. Now let's have a look here. And here's a risk matrix. Okay, so NDIS does not put out a risk matrix. You could even make your own. It doesn't matter as long as it gives you the information that you're going to need. So when we're doing a risk assessment, it doesn't matter whether it's a participant risk assessment, a business risk assessment, a risk assessment of this house over here or this whatever. Risk assessment is a risk assessment. We use the same methodology. So what we've got are two axes in risk assessment and calculation of the risk, in rating the risk. And we have axis Y, which is the likelihood of something happening, right? And then our axis X, which is the consequence should it happen. And this is risk calculation. This is where we rate a risk. We must rate a risk. So we identify the risk. Here we are identifying risk. And now we're going to rate it. So we can refer back to this, okay? So this is just one way of doing it. This is my way of doing it. I've got a couple of examples in here already. So identified risk. Well, we identified that somebody has a falling issue when they're getting on or off a bus, okay? That's quite common. So that's triggered by a lack of environmental awareness. It could also be triggered by getting on the bus. I mean, it doesn't, you know, that part isn't going to get you in any trouble. You just do it as logically and as carefully as you can, and I'm sure it'll be all right. Now, the risk rating, okay? So let's go, well, this is a person, this is a real person. So falling when getting on and off the bus. Well, the consequence, it could be major. I won't say extreme, but we'll say major. And the likelihood, it happens all the time. So for that person, and I know that person from a service that I was assisting, is high. So there's our, does that all make sense to everybody? So the likelihood was almost certain that when they get on and off a bus, they're going to trip. So we're on here, we're on this bottom line. And I said that the consequence, yeah, you know, you wouldn't be wrong if you said extreme, but I'm going to stick with, you know, major rather than extreme, which means that that brings me to this high. And this is my rating. Make sense? So that's how we rate a risk. So we come down here and I've said that's high. So I'm going to go high. Okay. So which of the goals does this impact for this person? Community access. And what's the risk treatment for this? Well, the support worker must remind him the step is approaching and wait with him at the door. Okay, so that's in this particular situation. Now, what I want you to look at is your risk frequency. Like, when are you going to review? When I go and see review someone's work, or I'm auditing and I see 12 months, 12 months, 12 months, 12 months, 12 months, I just think, you haven't put any thought into that yet. Now, who knows from the NDIS practice standards point of view, how often does a risk have to be reviewed? What's the rule around that? Yes, very much so, Andrew. Who knows? From the practice standard? Well, you know, I really like the numbers that you're saying, but the practice standard says annually, you can't go any longer than a year. Okay. But I think that, yes, you can't go any longer than a year, but if circumstances change, then it's sensible to reassess that risk. Okay. So it's just same as with the support plan. A support plan must be reviewed at least annually. A risk assessment must be reviewed at least annually, with the proviso that if anything changes in between, you must review. Yeah. Okay. For both of those. So if bottom line is, if we see something hasn't been reviewed and it's been 15 months, you'll get a major nonconformity for either of those. Yeah. But also if I see someone with, suicidal tendencies or ideation, it doesn't matter, and they've got a 1 year and the last suicide attempt was maybe 6 months ago, I would say not appropriate. Make sense? So it's in proportion to the complexity. It's not a standard because the practice standards say 12 months, we can say 12 months. You think about that particular situation and what you think is a more appropriate timing. So when you get to the point where somebody, okay, you have a person and their suicidal ideation, the last time they had suicidal ideation was 18 months ago. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to review it necessarily in 3 months then, or in a month. You know, they haven't done this in 18 months. So it's safer to go, okay, well, I don't know this person now. They just come into my service. I'm not going to say a year, but I'm going to say 6 months. I'm just going to review this in 6 months because I don't know them. And then if still nothing has happened, I'm likely to go a year. You know what I mean? So we really do deal with each situation, and we don't have a cookie cutter for any of these. So Nick has said, yep. Nick has said at least 12 months, but yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're right. You've got that right. So every 12 months at least for both support plans and risk assessments. But please think that through, depending on the particular risk, that person, and how well you know that person. Because if you don't know them well enough to give them 12 months, don't do it. Yeah, so just think about it in proportion to the type of risk, the person, and how well you know them. Okay. My next example is whether John, what's the risk? Whether John will be able to receive good nutrition in his new environment of shared housing. It's triggered by his likes and dislikes, what he will eat and won't eat, the choice and control requirement, and access to nutritious food. Okay, so we've already, this was a real one as well. So we've already identified that as being medium, which means whoever I worked this one through said that the likelihood could have been any one of these. But let's just go, it's either going to be this one or this one, because we've come out with a medium. Okay, so we've got a medium risk rating based on likelihood and consequence. And which of the goals is this going to impact his ability to make safe choices? And that was one of his goals, okay, was to make safer choices for himself. The risks treatment strategy to be put in place: nutrition support plan, seeing a dietitian, and mealtime management plans. Okay, so this person is not in the kind of high acuity mealtime management groups of severe dysphagia or severe diabetes, etc. It's something a bit nuanced in between that, you know, just a little bit picky with his food, still needing to have some choice and control, and making sure that he has access to those nutritious foods. So a little bit like that 22-year-old young man that I was talking about, he's really good at, you know, like he's only got a mild intellectual disability, moderate autism, he does very well. He's got he finished school, you know, all those sorts of things. He's a mad keen gamer and you can't get him off, which is a problem, but not a problem for him. It's a problem for everybody else. And so that would really, it's not about him, but that would really relate to him as well, because if he had his way, he would simply eat pizza all day and Coca-Cola, pizza and Coca-Cola. And that doesn't work well, does it? That's not going to lead him to a good, healthy life. He's going to end up with all his family's metabolic disorders, and he's already putting on weight. So really tough. So we don't have to be in that super severe group of people to need a mealtime management plan. And we need behavior support for this boy, this young man, because he's quite difficult to reason with. There isn't any reasoning, to be honest. I mean, really, when he doesn't want to do something, he'll simply put on his earphones and he will not listen or talk to you. So we can't fix anything. We can't change anything. We can simply encourage. We cannot make him. We cannot lock anything up. We cannot take anything away. And the father in this situation is the problem, to be honest, and the mother. So they expect things to be done, but they're not willing to do them themselves. So support workers cannot dictate to somebody what they're going to have. We can encourage. That's what we do. and do our best to encourage. So that is our main risk profile. Okay, so we've got time now. So what we would do from that, so we've got a couple here. So what we would do with this is now go, okay, well, let's just pretend you don't have any other sort of risk management document, like let's pretend you don't have a software to oversight all of your risks. Let's open the participant risk register and say, okay, so let's say we've done 5 assessments and we've got all those risks to list, so that you're having a really good look at them across the week whenever you need to. Something a bit. Okay, so it's just not coming over to the far edge for me. I'm just going to open up a different one. I just can't get that to go where I want it to go. So we just go in here. I'm just going to open up the participant risk register in here. And this is what we mean by having the helicopter view. So we've done a few risk assessments. Now we've got participant risk register. So we've got person 1, for example, Jane Doe. Is everyone seeing the risk register? Yep. We've got person 1, Jane Doe. We don't need to write the whole thing all over again. This is a snapshot. Yeah. So we go, this person, we assess them as having some vulnerability to hot water. They can abscond at times. They can be violent. Remember, this is not the whole assessment that we just did on that risk assessment. This is our snapshot. And they are at risk of exploitation. So it asks here, what's the risk to others if this is unmanaged? Okay, so obviously violence is high, absconding could be medium, exploitation, that's not really a risk to others in this situation, and the hot water isn't a risk to others at this point. Although if they lived in, let's just say for argument's sake, if they lived in a shared house, maybe they would turn the hot water on somebody else. Okay, so it could be a risk to others. So does it impact the person's goals? Well, yes, and most likely it's going to in most situations. Do you need a dignity of risk for any of these? Can anyone tell me if any of these might attract the need for a dignity of risk form? And which one, if you think something might? So we've got hot water, absconding, violence, exploitation. I mean, there could be, we'd have to know more about the person, wouldn't we? But, for example, the dignity of risk is that sometimes a person wants to run their own bath, or they want to be able to feel empowered enough to do that. So maybe somehow there's not letting them just do it all the time, but maybe being able to run their own bath, but with supervision to just help make sure they're safe. So they could have no interest whatsoever in running their own bath, or maybe it really means a lot to them to do it. So it's going to depend on every single person. What's the source of the information? It's really important that it wasn't just something that came out of someone's head, that it came through a risk assessment form. Okay. And then your date for review. Okay. So this is your headline act. So once you've got 20 clients in here, and you're able to just see at a moment's notice what everybody's risks are. And also you can either give your risk assessment to your support workers so that they can see what the strategy is, or you can give them, a printed out version or, electronic version of just this, so they can see that. Now, for those of you who have support workers who don't know about the risk and you're the only ones that know about the risk, I think that's asking for trouble. Okay, so if I was a support worker and I didn't know about the risk and wasn't privy to the risk strategy, I would be pretty annoyed and it would be really unsafe. So you need to make sure that you give every piece of assistance and knowledge within reason to your support workers so that they're equipped to deal and equipped and know what the risks are for people. Okay, so this is the end place where we'll just go to the chat. Freedom from movement or absconding. Well, some people just abscond. So I think we're not talking about restricting someone so they can't move. Some people will run away. Well, however you want to call it, it's up to you. So yeah, some people will wander, some people will abscond. It's up to you what word you use. Letting them run their own bath. Yes, it's important for some, and others it may not be. So it's going to depend on each person. If it really matters to them, then maybe you can put some sort of risk indemnity and plan in place that you're going to do your utmost best to help them to be able to run their own bath, but managed in such a way that everybody's safe. So coming back to other things that you asked about, that's our compliance. We don't want that. We want to go back to our participant. And we've got 5 minutes left, so let's have a look. So what we've got is we've done our participant risk profile. There's a nutrition and swallowing checklist. You've got your environment and manual handling risk assessment, which remember we said was for community clients. Yeah, just open it quickly for you. Okay, so it looks more at the home of the person so that you can be sure that you're not sending your staff into a place where they're going to have, you know, a 99% chance of tripping on a carpet that's not in the right place. You need to know that the workplace is safe for your staff member as well. And also what comes into that is making sure that there isn't, you know, it's free from violence as well. There are plenty of places I used to go into where there would be some, you know, a violent area or a less than appropriate area to send staff. So we need to deal with those things. And then of course, looking at all the things that your staff have to do. What are the manual handling things that are going to be needing? You know, does your client weight bear? All of those things. Will they be needing these sort of transfers, etc.? And so that's your community. Next one, we've looked at that duty of loan. So your participant living alone risk assessment, if it's flagged, if it's needed, because not everyone needs it, because not everyone lives alone, it will just ask certain questions. And I've used traffic lights again to let you know which ones become the high rated issues. Of course, you need to make decisions at the end of this. It's not going to, like a computer, produce the answer for you. It takes critical reasoning. You need to look at this and decide, well, I can see that there's a lot of risk here for this person. So I'm going to, you know, make sure I respond to that with a risk management strategy. Here's another type. There's two. This one's got macros in it. Some people like macros, some people don't. So when you tick the appropriate box, it should color up. I've got to enable it. There you go. So it's got macros in it. You can choose either one. It's up to you. Next, in our last 2 minutes, your outing or community access risk assessment checklist. Yes, I'm quite liking the community access word. Looking at all sorts of things about the venue, the travel, the safety in relation to that, familiarity, and making sure that people have mobile phones. Yep, making sure people are able to contact you. So it's quite simplistic. And last but not least, where were we? And we've already looked at the participant transition. So I think you've got a good suite of tools to look at. Any questions? I know it's just hitting 2:30, which is the time. So I can see a few people have dropped off. To state the fairly obvious, wouldn't it make sense for the NDIS to put together a clear package and pathway for cell providers so there's nothing overlooked? Well, it would have made sense a long time ago, wouldn't it? Absolutely. It's why many of us are a little bit fed up. You know, like it's a little bit much, really. But we're putting together, me and an RN and a behaviour support practitioner, we're putting together some training for cell providers. It's probably going to take us about 6 months to write, but we're a good team with, you know, behaviour practitioner, the RN for the module 1, and me for the governance and the sticking together of all these things, and my operational experience. We think it's going to be really good, and we think it's really needed. This will be sent to you. I'm new, coming from an acute hospital. Oh, you must be absolutely shocked by the NDIS if you've come from an acute hospital. Like, people just like blink their eyes and think, how did we get here? But we're doing our best, and you know, it is what it is. And if we just keep fronting up, you keep fronting up and learning, and we keep, you know, introducing new things as more is revealed, I think we're definitely getting there. It is a better system than the old one. It's far more innovative, you know. So we're on the right track, everyone. Yes, it's mind-blowing. It is. Yeah, so in accessing the documents, so they get sent to you in the Eventbrite. So please, if you haven't got it by, you know, like tomorrow lunchtime or tomorrow afternoon, check your spam, because it often goes to spam. Okay. Any more questions? Hit me up for it now. Chocolates, I know. And I definitely give them out if we're face-to-face. Caramellos for everyone. Unless you need a mealtime management plan, and then, well, you know, I won't give it to you. All right, everyone. Well, I think if there's no more questions, I do have a clarity of purpose form, but hasn't the NDIS just released one? Did someone say they've just released one? They'll be replacing me soon, that NDIS commission. Yes, the mental health wellbeing. I'll throw that one in. Absolutely. Mental health wellbeing plan. Yeah. Let me see if it's as good as mine. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all. Really good that you come. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Medication purpose form. About time. But it's in PDF. Why is it in PDF? Yeah, it's okay. It'll do. All right, guys, have a good one.